Seems like an absolute political horror.
It is a political horror. It is a dark comedy. It's
You told me it made you lose faith in democracy for a few minutes.
It did, because like it's one thing if our overlords are evil, and it's another thing if they are incompetent. But what if they are incompetent and evil? Like that's just the worst. Like you don't mind if Satan's in charge so long as he knows what the fuck he's doing.
All right, everyone. Welcome to this episode of They Might Be Werewolves. I'm your host, Patrick. I'm here with my guest host for the week, Tom. Say hi, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
Classic. This week we are discussing the film Wag the Dog. And you'll be proud of me. I got the title right that time.
Yay!
Yeah.
It's only your favorite movie.
It's not my favorite movie, but I enjoy it a lot. So I'm going to start with an opening question. Did you know that Jim Belushi was Albanian?
Of course I did not know Jim Belushi was Albanian. Let alone did I know, I had no idea he could speak Albanian, which he does so masterfully in this film. Do you think his brother's Albanian?
I would hope. I mean, he was Albanian. He's no longer Albanian.
Because he's no longer with us. Poor John. But so John was Albanian too then?
Yeah, I was assuming his parents altogether were Albanian. So, what are your thoughts? What are your initial thoughts of this film?
This is one of the darkest films I have ever seen. If the premise of the television show Veep is that government is incompetent, and if the premise of the show House of Cards is that government is evil, the premise of this movie is that government is both incompetent and evil. Which is really the worst of both premise.
So we're going to go through the film and we're going to run it down step by step. Is there anything you want to start out with discussing, or do you want to just go through it?
Let's just get into it. Let's get in with the opening scene in which we learn the president has gotten himself into a little bit of trouble.
So the movie opens with a political campaign ad for the current sitting president of the United States. It is two jockeys talking about not changing horses in midstream. This is an old campaign ad that's originated with Abraham Lincoln during his second campaign.
It was also used by Franklin Roosevelt in his third campaign in 1944. He was harking back to Lincoln, basically making the same argument Lincoln was, which is we're in the middle of a war. Like, you don't want to switch out who's in charge right now. It would be a bad idea.
And in the connotations of this movie, that's an incredibly dark thought.
Because there is no war?
Or that they just make wars to win elections?
Well, it worked for William McKinley in 1900. So
yeah,
if it works, it works.
Yeah. So after the campaign ad, we are introduced to Conrad Green, which is Robert De Niro's character. He has been brought in to fix a scandal the current sitting president of the United States has gotten himself in.
Correct, yes.
That scandal is that the president has been accused of personal misconduct with a Firefly girl.
Which is really just the stand-in for the Girl Scouts. So not only is the president being accused of an affair, he's being accused of misconduct with a girl who is yet to graduate high school.
Yeah, it's about as dark a situation as you can get, which is crazy for the timing of this film because the Monica Lewinsky Bill Clinton scandal happens like a month later.
Correct. So this movie was released in December of '97, and I believe the scandal, the Clinton sex scandal, didn't that break in like March or April? Oh, January of '98. So that close.
Because my notes, yeah. If it released in December, because it says my notes have it being a month before the scandal broke.
So,
and, as well as the Al Shifa pharmaceutical factory bombing.
So then this film would have still been in theaters when the scandal broke, likely.
Oh yeah, back then, like they didn't go just straight to streaming after 2 months. You got like 8 months in the theaters.
There was no streaming, and you would, if it was a successful film, it would be in the mainstream theaters for 2 or 3 months, and then in the what they used to have, what they called dollar theaters, which were you don't really see
where they
those
take us on field trips.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really see them now these days because streaming's basically put an end to their business model. But they would take movies that had been out for 5 or 6 months, but not quite a year yet, and kind of do their second theatrical run. And their business model is it would be cheaper to show those films in a second run, and so the ticket cost was very, very low. Usually $1, hence the name Dollar Theater.
Yeah. So we're introduced to Robert De Niro's Conrad Breen, and he is a fixer character. This is a predominantly 1990s trope, I feel, for films. Like, I feel like he's very similar to Harvey Keitel in Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, the wolf character who comes in to fix when John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson shoot that guy in the head in the back of their car, and they have to clean it up real.
Right.
Shot Marvin in the face.
Bill Crystal plays a character like that.
Who does? I'm sorry, you went out.
Billy Crystal. Billy Crystal plays a character like that, where he's trying to cover up the sex scandal of a Hollywood starlet. Can't remember the name of the film.
I mean, that was a real thing. That happened a lot. The old Hollywood system. They would have cleaners who would come in and fix images and get rid of people. There's a Coen Brothers movie about it. Hail Caesar.
Yes.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad film. So you Googling it right now?
Yeah, I'm Googling it right now because it's bothering me. It was Bill Crystal and Catherine Zeta-Jones and Julia Roberts.
America's Sweethearts?
That's it, America's Sweethearts. Where Bill Crystal's kind of like an agent and he's trying to help.
Yeah, John Cusack.
Yeah, that's the one, America's Sweethearts. He's trying to help cover up Catherine Zeta-Jones's scandal. And doesn't he? I think he ends up falling for Julia Roberts or something, or somebody falls for Julia Roberts, because why wouldn't you?
I mean, we all fall for Julia Roberts at some point in our career lives.
I mean, she had me a Pretty Woman, so, and Richard Gere for that matter.
We'll talk about that later. What was it? Oh, yeah. So we're introduced to Conrad Breen. He is played by the immortal Robert De Niro, even though I have a bone to pick with Robert De Niro acting in general. Like, I feel like... Do you think Dustin Hoffman's the better actor, isn't he?
Yes, and honestly, like, I thought this was an odd role for De Niro. He's not necessarily who I would have cast for this part, just because, like, the Italian gangster thing kind of doesn't really fit for that for this part, which is what I normally associate De Niro with. Oddly, I think Al Pacino would have been a better choice. And he's
That would be a hell of a movie. I would have watched Al Pacino in that role. That would have been fascinating. Gone full devil's advocate on it.
Yeah, exactly. Which is kind of part of what Conrad Bream is doing, especially whenever he's talking about the bomb going down the chimney in the first Gulf War.
Yeah. He's like, I was in the room when they filmed it.
You were? Who says I wasn't?
Yeah. So Conrad Breen is brought into the White House bunker, and he's introduced to Anne Heche's character, played by Winifred Ames. And she is the White House aide she is the liaison between the White House and Conrad Breen's character.
And becomes the liaison for Dustin Hoffman's character later on as well. She handles the communication between the fixers and the White House is her role.
Yes.
Like it's almost like she's not necessarily, because she's like literally kind of like that woman part in a science fiction where their job is to read the computer.
No, that is 100% like her role. This is 100% a buddy comedy between Dustin Hoffman and Robert De Niro.
Right, and then she basically is just the telephone between De Niro and Hoffman and the president who they're working for. Yeah. Like you could cut her out of the film almost.
Yeah, the movie kind of frames her as like a trio film. But I agree with you. I don't know if she's 100% necessary to this film. She doesn't detract from it.
No, she doesn't.
I think she does just fine.
Yeah, I will agree with that. She doesn't take anything away from the film, but she doesn't really add very much either.
Yeah. So he starts to come up with this idea to produce a war with Albania to distract from the misconduct scandal of the president.
Right. The idea is if you drum up a war, then the press will be consumed by covering the war instead of covering whatever scandal the president's involved in. Yep. And for some reason, Conrad Bream decides the war has to be with Albania.
His logic is there's not a lot of Albanian citizens.
Right.
Not very popular in the cultural mindset.
Right.
Not a lot of people. Like, how many people can tell you what the capital of Albania is?
Triana.
Is it?
I know it starts. I know it starts with a T, right?
Isn't that the singer?
Or is it Trieste?
Oh, I thought you said Rihanna.
No, I said Triana, like with a T. Yeah, I wasn't quite right. It's Tariana, Tirana, Tariana, the capital of
that serves you well in life.
I was super close.
You said close. Rihanna.
No, I said Triana. Go back, watch the tape. I said Triana, and it's Tyrion.
I'll let the audience decide.
I was close.
Audience decide whether or not he said Rihanna or Triana.
The audience don't know. The audience don't know the capital of Albania. I know. I'm a former geography bee champ.
That's the lamest thing I've heard.
I got a trophy from the 4th grade.
Anyways, so they fly, Anne Heche and Robert De Niro's characters fly to California to meet with the producer. The producer is Stanley Mutz, the best character in this movie, played by Dustin Hoffman. Yes, Dustin Hoffman is, what is it?
I was going to say, I think we both agree that Stanley Mutz is an impression of a certain person.
Robert Evans. He's 100% Robert Evans.
Yes.
For the people who don't know, Robert Evans is a famous movie producer, and he is responsible for The Godfather.
Rosemary's Baby.
Rosemary's Baby, and a lot of 70s, 80s work.
And kind of had a little bit of a comeback in the 90s.
Yeah. He also had a weird-ass cartoon for a while where he and Slash and his maid went on adventures together.
And he did this series of radio ads for ESPN, and you can find the recordings of some of them on YouTube, where the ads start out, it's like, Robert Evans, Rams fan, and then he just like goes on these rants that have nothing to do with football.
It would sound like they're totally worth the trip. The cartoon's very weird too. It's very strange. So he's in the, but I was watching the director's commentary, and not once did they bring up Robert Evans. I think you said Dustin Hoffman said he was doing his dad as in this movie, but I was like, you're 100% Robert Evans.
It's like, he at least read Robert Evans's book for this role. The kid stays in the picture. Or probably listened to the audiobook because he's got the voice down pat.
Yeah. In fact, they first meet him. He's in a suntan bed,
right,
in his house,
which of course is where Robert Evans would hang out.
Yeah, he looks gross. He looks like a piece of leather. So they proceed to convince Stanley Motz to produce them a war,
which he doesn't actually need a lot of convincing. He even says he's all about it for free. He's all about it. Like to him, this is going to be his Oscar. This is going to be the pinnacle achievement of his career.
He spends the whole movie worrying about credits,
right?
Which will come back to bite him in the ass later. But
right, because De Niro keeps telling him, "No, if you seek credit for this, I'll have to kill you." It's like,
yes.
We'll give you an ambassadorship. You can have friends. And of course, he's Robert Evans. He can go hang out at Cannes whenever the hell he wants to. He's not interested in an ambassadorship.
Yes. So they become the trio of the movie that this film is centered around. Mind you, before we go any further in this film, Wag the Dog is a comedy. We first started discussing this movie. I was like, when you start objectively discussing this movie, it doesn't seem like a comedy at all. It seems like an absolute political horror.
It is a political horror. I mean, it is a dark comedy. It's
You told me it made you lose faith in democracy for a few minutes.
It did, because it's one thing if our overlords are evil, and it's another thing if they are incompetent. But what if they are incompetent and evil? That's just the worst. You don't mind if Satan's in charge so long as he knows what the fuck he's doing.
So as we go through this movie, I'm going to probably dispute that point of them being completely incompetent. I feel like everybody in this movie is very capable of what they do. I feel like as a producer, Stanley Motz is very capable of producing things. I feel like as individual parts, they're all very capable.
So what I'm going to say is actually Motz is the most competent. And it's Bream and Anne Heche that keep messing up, and then Motz has to come in and clean up for them.
All right, I can give you that point. All right, so...
And, of course, Motz doesn't work for the government.
No, he's got to make money, so he has to be competent. So Stanley Motz assembles this crack team of creatives, which is one of the strangest group of crack teams I've ever seen formed in a film.
But you could totally see that group of people putting together a movie.
It's Dustin Hoffman's producer, Dennis Leary's Fad King. I want to clearly say Fad King.
Yeah.
Andrea Martin's costume designer. She doesn't contribute much. And Willie Nelson's songwriter, who might be
he is the film's or the war's Randy Newman, right? He's like literally like you know how like the trope about Randy Newman is that he just writes songs about what he sees. That's kind of what Willie Nelson is doing this whole movie.
And he cracks me up every time he's on screen because he's just singing to himself gibberish, or he's asking himself, Jim Belushi's Albanian? He's just stunned by it. Just shocked.
Or and like getting back to that thing where he literally is just writing songs about how about what he sees. Like he's working for the president, but somebody shows him a political cartoon of the president's misbehavior, and he just starts writing a song about it.
Oh, Stanley Motz is like, no, I just wanted to show you that. You don't need to sing about it. That seems inappropriate to what we're doing right now.
Right, which is literally trying to save this president's rear. But he like just keeps writing the song anyway.
Stanley Motz comes up with the idea that he needs to have a Albanian video of Albanian war footage.
Yes,
which he
can't
makes
have
up.
A war without any footage.
Yes. Well, before that, he comes up with what starts the war, which is a Albanian terrorist strike found on Canada in a suitcase bomb.
A suitcase nuke.
Yeah, suitcase nuke. He's like, they got the bomb. The bomb is a suitcase.
Right, because Albania doesn't have any missiles. Everybody knows they don't have any missiles. So how are they going to get the bomb into the United States? Well, of course, they put it in a suitcase and have somehow snuck it into Canada.
So Stanley Motz decides that he needs footage of this war. So he decides to have auditions for Albanian girls running through desolate, like, exploded villages. And this is where
they find the perfect girl for it.
Kirsten Dunst.
Kirsten Dunst, yes.
Yeah. Pre-Spider-Man, post-interview with the vampire Kirsten Dunst.
Yes. And Kirsten Dunst is a young teenage actress looking to build her resume. And so she, of course, asked Bream, because all the Hollywood people are very concerned about credit. And that is like the last thing Bream wants them to have. It's credit.
And he legit tells her, he's like, oh, no. After he has her sign something. Once she signs it, she asks about her credit. And he goes, oh, no, we'll have you killed.
Right. He says, you put this on this CV, we will kill you.
Yes.
Full stop.
Yeah. He says this a lot. And he is not joking.
He is not joking.
My favorite part of this part of the movie is they're trying to decide between a cat and a dog.
Right.
So they're like, it's a giant blue. They're in a room. There's a bunch of people.
It's just a green
walking around. It's a blue screen. It's a big green screen. And they're like, do we give her a cat or do we give her a dog? He's like, well, this guy's hung up on the Shih Tzu and I want a cat. And
right.
They eventually just give her something to stand in. And she's like, this is a bag of Tostitos chips.
The animal trainer, who is played by the same guy from the Mission to Mars comedy. What is his name?
Harlan Williams.
Harlan Williams keeps trying to get a dog into the film. And Motz is insistent it has to be a kitten. And so they just give her a bag of potato chips. And so she's carrying this bag of chips like it's an animal. And then they add the cat in post. And of course, so Motz is the producer, so he gets his wish with the cat. But then he gets into an argument with the president as to whether it's going to be a calico kitten or a white kitten. And the president wins that fight, and it is a white kitten. The girl is running away.
You think the white kitten was a good choice? I think I would go with the calico.
I think a calico kitten would have been a better choice. I'm with Motz on that one. But
yeah, I think the overall choice of a cat was better than a dog.
Right. Especially since, Albania is a majority Muslim country, and in Islam, dogs aren't very well regarded, but the Prophet Muhammad kept cats, so cats are very popular pets over there.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Good to know.
it's the kind of things
Yeah.
geography champions know. uh, so after that, they need to go from they go to the music studio where Willie Nelson has a full
Oh
black
no.
church choir working on the song, right?
No. We need to go to the CIA.
I thought the CIA was after the
CIA.
song.
No. CIA is before the song, during the song, and that's when they find out that the war has been canceled, and they have to come up with old shoe.
Gotcha. Okay, so
Yeah.
the next scene after that is Anne Heche and Bream are basically going to the sound studio where Motz and Nelson are working on the song, and they get kidnapped by the CIA, and the CIA is dead set on killing them. But Motz uses his power, or not Motz, Bream, De Niro uses his power of persuasion to convince the CIA that fake wars involving nuclear weapons are going to be the wars of the future, and that this is a great practice run for them.
Also, Anne Heche's best part. The CIA agent is played by William H. Macy. I feel like William H. Macy is one of the great character actors.
Yes, he's hilarious.
I don't think it's enough. He plays this role a lot, but like he does everything well. What I wanted to say was that Anne Heche's character here, her best character trait is that when she gets into a troubling situation, she goes on little tirades and rants. They're just funny to me. Like she does one later after the plane explodes, where she just goes on this like a liberal attack of Stanley Motz. That cracks me up the whole time.
And the other thing that's great about Anne Heche is, so the president is involved in this absolutely lurid sex scandal that's threatening his campaign. But the thing she is so concerned that is actually going to derail the president is that if he has any involvement with illegal immigrants at all in any capacity. So she's like checking the citizenship status of Kirsten Dunst and everybody working on producing this fake war. And it is an obsession of hers throughout the film that comes up time and time again. Like, we can't have the president employing an illegal immigrant.
It really does bother her. It comes into play later. That's actually pretty funny. But for right now, it's...
Right. I mean, but the first time we see it is when she's checking Kirsten Dunst's citizenship.
She's not actually Albanian, is she? We can't have an Albanian actually in this.
Right. It's like, we cannot have this president associated with illegal immigration in any kind of way.
Yeah. Now we go from the CIA coming to a deal with Conrad Breen and Anne Heche's character. They to them.
Basically, the agreement, and the agreement's kind of unspoken, is that the CIA is going to put an end to this fake war, but they're not going to kill Heche and De Niro. Right?
I thought it was that they were going to leave them alone to do what they're doing, because
not really.
Craig T. Nelson
because
is the one who brings them into the war.
As soon as they get to the sound studio, we see the president's opponent releasing CIA intel that basically states the war is over. So the CIA leaked to the president's opponent, and then that opponent goes on TV and ends the war, right?
Yeah, that's Craig T. Nelson. Director Barry Levinson's longtime friend and acting partner,
who famously played the Minnesota football coach on the sitcom Coach.
And Mr. Incredible in The Incredibles. It's for younger audiences who haven't seen Coach.
Okay. Are The Incredibles a more important cultural touchstone than Coach?
Probably.
Oh. Okay.
Name two characters on Coach other than Coach.
Well, I don't think I could name two Incredibles either.
Mr. Incredible, Mrs. Incredible, Little Incredible, Little Incredible Girl.
I thought the girl's name was Violet.
It is Violet, you lying piece of garbage.
But I don't remember, and of course the mom is Mrs. Incredible, but I don't remember the kid's name, the boys.
Dash. Dash and
Dash.
Jack Jack. Jack Jack.
Jack Jack's the baby.
And it's Elastigirl, not Mrs. Incredible.
Oh, well, see?
Get it right, dweeb.
I saw that movie once.
It's a good movie. It's the best Fantastic Four movie
and I'm
ever
sorry,
made.
like, Elastigirl might be her maiden name, but when she married Mrs. Incredible, Mr. Incredible, she became Mr. She became Mrs. Incredible. I'm a traditionalist, and that's the way I see it.
That's a different movie altogether. Okay, so off that tirade. Like, where can we oh yes. Cut to Craig T. Nelson's rival senator and candidate for the presidency canceling the war, saying hostilities are over, basically getting intel from the CIA that there is no war to begin with. So he's just fine with canceling it.
Right.
He doesn't come out and say there was never a war to begin with.
Right, because he realizes that that's something he probably can't get away with. And probably the CIA told him that too.
Willie Nelson is in the middle of writing the big song for the war.
Right.
Like, the Tippecanoe and Tyler too.
And it is a banger. Like, he's got a full church choir, and they're like singing about the glories of the war and the men who guard the borders and all this. And then he's like told to stop because
it's over.
The war's over. There's no need for a song. And of course, this really upsets Motz.
And he's told to stop because the war is over. He's like upset.
But Motz goes, it's not over. I'm the producer. I decide when the war is over. And so Motz gets thinking. Motz is thinking. He goes, somebody was left behind. There is an American boy left behind.
Cast away like an old shoe.
Cast away like an old shoe.
So Anne Heche immediately gets on the phone. He's like trying to call military bases. Do you have anybody named Shoe or Schuster or Shimmons or?
And they find
something.
a guy named Schumann. And so he's going to be the big hero left behind enemy lines in our war.
Yeah, so before we are introduced to Schumann's character in this film, they decide to write a song called Old Shoe.
Yep.
And Willie Nelson and another one of the choir musicians start to get into work on it.
Yep.
And this is one of the points in the movie that salvages this movie for me, is that the entire movie is very cynical, except when it comes to the creativity of production, the actual act of producing something great.
Right. So the movie's very cynical about politics and government, but actually isn't cynical about the creative process, as it were. Right. The film does express a certain kind of joy in creating a movie. Or just being creative in general, whether it's coming up with the little green armbands that everybody who supports the war is supposed to wear, or, even like that argument about cat versus dog and then white cat versus calico cat. Like, even that, that's part of the creative process.
This is a movie about producing a film. I think it's one of the better movies about making movies, but it's also a movie that hates government and television.
Especially
it's a weird confluence of these three things.
Like, I think the movie is cynical about government and believes people involved in government are incompetent and evil, but it just loathes television. Like, it has no regard for it at all.
At one point, Anne Heche picks up a television and throws it away, and Conrad Breen asks, "What did the TV ever do to you?" And she goes, "It killed the electoral process."
Right. Like that, the problems with government really stem from TV. And a lot of this movie is told by TV clips. It's clips of reporters reporting things, or we see the various campaign ads of the opponents. We never see the president except for one shot in this whole movie, and it's from the back of his head. Yeah. And it's on TV. The camera is filming a TV of the president being filmed on TV. So it's interesting that the film clearly hates television, but is also using television to tell the story.
I really admire this movie because it was shot in 29 days,
mm-hmm.
which is super impressive because it's got artistic value to it. It's directed by one of the great American directors. It's Barry Levinson, who straight up hates television. He says he hates television. He's like, this movie is a diatribe against television. And written by one of the great American stage writers, David Mamet.
Yep.
Who is ironically not as successful a screenplay writer as he is a stage play writer.
Correct, yes.
Yes. I don't know. I feel like it's
David Mamet and his co-writer were the only people nominated for an award on this film, and it was for Best Adapted Screenplay.
Yeah, adapting a book that has the batshit premise of the Gulf War being faked to win George Bush a re-election.
Which, if that's true, it didn't work because George Bush was not reelected because the economy's stupid, famously, as William Jefferson Clinton put it.
That premise alone, though, is crazy, right? Like, just they faked the Gulf War.
Well, the second Gulf War might have been started to help get a different Bush reelected.
Or hide from a Florida voting scandal.
The world will never know.
Yeah. This movie is also very similar to an earlier comedy from the 90s that has almost the exact same premise called Canadian Bacon, directed by not Roger Moore, Michael
Moore, yes. In his only feature non-documentary film. And that movie stars John Candy and Ray Perlman.
Yeah, Ray Perlman. Alan Arkin is the president in that movie. He has a much larger role. But that movie's more comedic and lighthearted.
It's definitely more lighthearted. And the premise of that movie is the president and his aides don't actually want to start a war with Canada. They want to start a Cold War with Canada so they can rebuild the military-industrial complex. Because they did the math. An actual war with Canada would last about 10 minutes.
But a Cold War they could stretch out for decades.
Cold War they could stretch out for decades. And because the whole premise of the movie is that Alan Arkin is not going to be reelected because he's the only modern president not to have a war.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not Alan Arkin. It's Is it Alda?
It's the guy from MASH.
From MASH?
Yeah.
Yeah. Alan Arkin's a different actor. I apologize to viewers who are like, this idiot doesn't know his Alda from his Arkin.
Well, I mean, we're discussing an obscure Michael Moore movie.
I don't know if it's that obscure. I saw it a bunch as a kid. It was on Comedy Central all the time.
It is. It's actually one of my Canadian Bacon. Should be one we watch for this show eventually because it is one of my absolute favorite movies, and I think it's some of John Candy's best work as Sheriff Buck.
It's definitely better than Wagons East.
Like one of my. We shouldn't talk about Canadian Bacon because we're supposed to be talking about this film, but one of my favorite scenes is when they get pulled over in the truck and the truck is just painted "Canada sucks" all over it. And who was it from SNL that pulls him over? The Conehead guy.
Second City.
SNL. It's the Conehead guy.
Oh, it's Dan Aykroyd?
Dan Aykroyd pulls him over as a Canadian cop, and he's looking at the truck, and of course it says Canada sucks and Canada's terrible. And he's like, he gets him out of the truck, and he's got John Candy looking at him. He's like, "Do you see a problem here?" And John Candy's like real apologetic. He's like, "I'm so sorry, officer. Like, we live in the States, and some kids broke in, and they painted some graffiti. They know we travel back and forth across the border all the time. I'll get it painted over when I get the truck back to the shop." And the guy's like, "That's not the problem. Canada has 2 official languages." And then he shakes up a can of spray paint and he hands it to John Candy. He goes, "Now in French, if you please."
Another joke I really love is the Born in the USA joke where they get real gung ho and they're going to invade Canada by themselves, and they're just yelling "Oh, USA" over and over again because they don't know any of the lyrics to the song.
Right. And there's like this whole
right,
thing where they're obsessed with the CN Tower. It's a great film. Highly recommend.
I don't particularly care for most of Michael Moore's movies, but this one's a good one. Back to Wag the Dog. Where were we? Old Shoe. They come up with this song, Old Shoe,
yes.
and they decide to like press it to sound old, and they're going to sneak it into the Library of Congress,
which they do successfully, and then they manipulate the press into playing the song.
Is it dangerous to like put the idea that stuff in the Library of Congress could be that easily manipulated?
I mean, for all we know, it probably could be.
This movie's wrecked you, huh?
I mean, it kind of has. Like, I was already pretty cynical about media and its relationship to government, and this movie put that, to use another movie reference, brought that cynicism up to 11. So now I'm thinking, maybe you can just slip something into the old Library of Congress.
Don't you remember that? Yeah, because they have another Washington aide sleep with a news reporter, and they're talking, and she's like, "Don't you remember that old song, Shoe or Old Shoe or something?" Like,
yeah. And like, just like from looking at the just like the personal relationships these people have, like, so there's this reporter that I liked, her name Mary Catherine Ham. She wrote for a blog called The Federalist, but her husband was an IT guy for the Obama administration, right? So like,
where's the line drawn, really? Like, that's what you're asking?
Yeah, it's like, so she's a reporter and her husband works for the president. So like, am I supposed to believe he's not like just in the course of normal couple talk, just talking about what's going on at work, she could have gotten stories, or the administration could leak stuff that way without even meaning to. Like, I don't know. I just, this movie's very depressing.
Wait, folks, it gets more depressing.
Yes, it does. And I know I'm smiling and laughing, but just know inside my heart is broken.
You're not going to glue this egg back together.
No.
You're the one who didn't want to do butter.
Well, you didn't want to do election.
So I thought this was a good middle ground. All right. So they sneak Old Shoe into the Library of Congress. We get Willie Nelson composing it. The final piece of this puzzle is meeting Sergeant Schumann, played by Woody Harrelson.
Now, before we meet him, I think it's important we should mention another Willie Nelson song. So before they go and get Schumann, they release a photo of Schumann to the press, and he's in his army uniform, and it's got tears in it. And the tears are actually Morse code, and they spell out the line, "Courage, Mom." And that, of course, spawns a country western hit written by none other than Willie Nelson.
Yes. So they're on a plane. The military is going to drop off Schumann to them to take to Washington as a grand return home. He's not been to Albania. He's been in the United States the whole time.
Right.
So it's the middle of the night. They're on the plane. It's our trio of heroes, Motts, Breen, and Ames. The military brings Schumann onto the plane. It's storming. He's looking around. Woody Harrelson's being Woody Harrelson, and they take off his jacket, and he's in manacles.
Yes, he's completely in chains. He cannot move.
Yeah.
And then he starts
leaves,
and they ask why he's in chains, and it turns out he has not been in special forces for the last 12 years. Oh no, he's been in special prisons for the last 12 years.
And Woody Harrelson's character in this movie might be one of the darkest film characters I've ever seen.
Probably one of the darkest characters ever. Probably the only character darker than this Woody Harrelson character is Shakespeare's Iago.
Yeah,
I mean he's on a level of insane evilness as the Joker, Iago, and Voldemort.
Yeah, he's like, it's hard to like express when you see Woody Harrelson in this movie. And it's supposed to be darkly comedic, but like it's edged to the darkness side a little too much, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
like, I think he's the weakest part of this film for me.
Well, actually, I think that Harrison played the character brilliantly. The trouble is that he's a criminally insane sociopath who has spent the past 12 years in a military prison for violating a nun in the worst imaginable ways that you could think of how you could use that word.
The movie plays it for laughs, though. Like,
right, and they have Woody Harrelson's character, old Schumann, heavily medicated on antipsychotics, and so all Harrison's character wants to do is go back to the penitentiary because tomorrow is bean day, and by God, he doesn't want to miss beans.
And I understand. Like, you get used to a meal each week, you want to have it. Like, you're like, I'm looking forward to bean day.
And like, for all we know, like that could be the best day of the week, right? Like, Lord knows what they're feeding him the other 6 days. It's like, you don't understand. Tomorrow's beans and the rest of the week is gruel.
So they take off. They're in the air. It's thundering. They got to get this guy to Washington.
The pilot did not want to take off, which I think goes back to my incompetence point. Like, here's an expert, the pilot. Like, he knows whether or not it's safe to fly. He's saying, I'm pretty sure we need to wait for the storm to clear before we take off. But they're like, no, because the television press is like, they want to see Schumann. They don't even think the president's opponent at this point is beginning to question the existence of Schumann. So they really want to get Schumann in front of the cameras as quickly as possible.
This tends to bite them in the butt. They're flying. I don't remember what Conrad Breen's character says. He says something that gets Schumann like start to be antsy. He's like, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" Like, in one of those situations where like he's about to have a psychotic fit.
Right. Well, I think part of it too was Schumann's paperwork, which we get to see, says that he's fine so long as he's medicated. And so they ask the officer that is handing them over to Conrad, so what happens if he's not medicated? Well, then he's not fine.
It's actually a much better joke in the movie.
And so they give him the bottle of pills, and he's supposed to take these every 2 or every 4 hours. And so over the course of the the plane ride and the crash, they're starting to run out of those pills. And I think more so than anything Mott said, it's the lack of pills that's starting to make old Shoe antsy.
So the plane crashes. Smash cut from the plane crashing to Anne Heche, Schumann, Burring, and Motts standing outside of the crash. And the plane has been obliterated. We assume the pilot's killed in a fireball, but they're perfectly fine. Like,
not a scratch on them. And,
like they look like they just walked off the plane.
Yep. And of course, a Hispanic guy, we assume he's Mexican, sees him because he's plowing that field with the combine tractor, and he picks him up and drives him to the nearest gas station in the combine. And the whole time, Anne Heche is like, this guy doesn't speak English. Like, he's definitely probably an illegal immigrant.
And you know how she feels about that. She can't be having that nonsense.
No, like that would be a worse thing than the sex scandal as far as she's concerned.
So we get to the gas station. They're trying to figure out how to get a ride to Washington.
Yep.
And then old Schumann decides to get up to no good.
Get up to his old tricks. He's out of his medication. And the daughter of the owner of the gas station, she's outside hanging clothes on a clothesline, and old Shoe chases her into the house, and she starts screaming. So the gas station owner grabs his shotgun, starts chasing after the two of them. And our trio of heroes follow into the farmhouse. And we don't actually see what happens, but whatever was going on, the gas station owner decided it'd be best to shoot old Shoe.
The joke's pretty funny, actually. I kind of laughed out loud at this joke.
You should not be laughing at this joke. Guys, if you see this film, it says you have a very dark soul if you laugh at this joke.
We see Dustin Hoffman's character looking into the room after the gunfire, after the first gunshot.
When the gal
he's like, okay, he's okay, he's
to
alive.
Hang the clothes, old Shoe says, pretty. Like he's one of the guys in Deliverance. This is a dark scene.
So he looks into the room. He's like, after the first gunshot, he's like, he's fine, he's still alive. And then there's immediately a second gunshot. He goes, he's dead.
And you know what? Good on that gas station owner. Like, old Shoe had to go.
He did. I was 100% for it, but I thought it was a funny way of working. The two shots fired is funny. So they get in another one of these situations where they realize their plans have gone up in smoke. So they have another smash cut joke where Stanley Motts is like, what is better than a returning prisoner of war gloriously coming home? Smash cut to full funeral with
military honors. And this is a guy who, of course, does not deserve any such honors and should probably be thrown in an unmarked pauper's grave somewhere. And then, of course, we get another Willie Nelson song about the fighting men of the 303.
Who do not exist.
Yes. Like, there are a lot of things that they come up with in this film that just simply do not exist. There's no war with Albania. Something we haven't mentioned yet, but was actually key to the early going of the story is the B-3 bomber. Right, like there's this whole,
very first scene.
Like, in order to buy time, they start leaking that the president is stuck in China, and of course, it has nothing to do with the B-3 bomber.
No, he's just like, this has nothing to do with the B-3 bomber. What's the B-3 bomber? There's no such thing as the B-3 bomber.
We just said it has nothing to do with the B-3 bomber, which officially does not exist, which is true.
Yeah. It doesn't exist, but it acts as a dog whistle to the media. And they're like, Is this have to do with the B-3 bomber? And the White House is like, there is no B-3 bomber.
Officially, there is no B-3 bomber. Of course, there's no B-3 bomber unofficially either, or in any capacity.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no B-3 bomber, but people think there's a B-3 bomber. This movie is almost like a step-for-step guide if you wanted to commit a government conspiracy.
Right. Like, I mean, another great scene that Mott's produces, we touched on it a little bit, but the one time we see the president in this film is he's getting off the plane from China, and there's two Albanian refugees, and one is a young girl and the other is an elderly woman we assume is her grandfather. And the young girl gives the president a bundle of wheat, which we are told is an Albanian peace offering, and the president gives the grandmother his coat.
Yes,
and it is a brilliantly staged scene of political propaganda.
It's just funny to me because they're like, is there an Albanian harvest festival? Like, can we like get this guy some like a cow or a goat of the year?
Right, but they decide to go with wheat, which I think was a wise choice, right? Because animals are unpredictable.
Who did you like? Have you ever looked into Anne Heche's death? Who plays Winifred Haynes in this movie?
I actually briefly did in prepping for this podcast. I seen that read a little bit about Anne Heche's death on Wikipedia. So she died in a car wreck, and there were two smaller car wrecks just before the car wreck that killed her, that were hit and runs. So she got involved in two fender benders. She's trying to get away, and finally at the end of the night she crashes into a woman's house. Her house catches on fire from the car wreck, and Anne Heche dies in the house fire. Now, the original toxicology report on Heche basically indicated that she was as high as a kite, that she had cocaine and fentanyl in her system, which, if that had been true, end of story. But when the LA coroner's office did the toxicology report, well, neither the cocaine nor the fentanyl were active in her system at the time of the crash. The fentanyl had been administered to her at a hospital as a pain treatment and had been given to her under a doctor's supervision, and she would not have been released from the hospital had the fentanyl still been active. And as for the cocaine, it was in her system, but it had already metabolized. Like it was no longer active. So it wasn't the cocaine or the fentanyl that caused the crash. And so we don't know why she was driving so erratically that night.
Have you ever seen the video of her body being carried away on a stretcher? Like she's the paramedics have her straight.
So you texted
straight
me
up body bag
that video, but one thing it did say on Wikipedia, which might explain some of what's going on in that video, she did not die on the scene. She died at the hospital later.
Well, I know, but she sat straight up out of the body bag. Like they had put her in a body bag, and she straight up, and they pushed her back down into it.
Yeah, but she wasn't dead yet at that point.
It was weird, right? Like normally they don't put body bags on people unless they're dead.
Well, somebody obviously wanted her dead, Patrick.
Was it Conrad Breen?
I don't know.
Was it Ellen DeGeneres?
I mean, probably, but I don't know how Ellen could have pulled something like that off, or why she did it now and not 10 years ago. Maybe it was. Maybe it had something to do with Epstein. I don't know. Maybe she was on Epstein's island.
Oh my God, that's something you need Conrad Breen for. You think Conrad Breen suicided Epstein?
Probably. I like. There's no way Epstein killed himself. Like, I dismiss most conspiracy theories out of hand just because I know that two men can keep a secret so long as one is dead. And so the more people involved in a conspiracy, the less likely it is to be true. So like 9/11 happened exactly the way the government told us, because to pull an operation of that size off, you would have needed hundreds of people involved and somebody would have had a conscience. But something like Epstein, like maybe you only need 3-4 people to pull something like that off. And then you add in the fact that like Epstein had generated some real powerful enemies like the royal family, the Mossad, the CIA, and Bill Gates. Like,
You never know.
oh,
And the Clintons.
and the Clintons and the Trumps. So like, yeah, I totally can believe that like one of the forces arrayed against Epstein put together a special forces team, and I don't know if they killed him, but they created the window of time for him to kill himself, because you're not going to hang yourself with paper sheets. I'm sorry.
So back to the movie. We find out that the president has won his re-election, and then we get to the final conflict of the movie, which is Dustin Hoffman wanting credit for all his work because he saw that don't changes.
Which is something we have seen coming the entire film, because right from the beginning, when Bream offers him an ambassadorship or money to pull this thing off, he's Robert Evans. He's got all the money in the universe. He doesn't need money, and he doesn't want an ambassadorship, because that's probably a lot of boring paperwork that he's just not interested in doing. And so no, what he wants is a story. He says, I'll do it for a story to tell. He's like, well, you could never tell anybody. He goes, it's just a figure.
And then we cut to a news story saying that Dustin Hoffman's character gets upset because he sees the "Don't Change Horses" in a midstream commercial again. And the whole movie, he's been deriding it as a piece of garbage, which it kind of is. It's kind of an old, flouty, kind of terrible ad.
Oh, and the ads that we see featuring that phrase throughout the film are deliberately terrible.
And it upsets him because like somebody says that's what won him the re-election.
Right. And I believe it's so one way of looking at it is the campaign ads and the president himself, they are the public facing image of, and what Motts and Bream are doing, that's the shadow campaign. And so the public campaign is taking credit for the victory on TV, and Motts knows that it was the shadow campaign that won this damn thing. And so we actually see, and so there's a Charlie Rose type PBS interview show going on like C-SPAN or something, where the campaign managers and ads directors are talking about what a great job they did, patting themselves on the back. And there's a 1-800 number Charlie Rose gives out, and he's going to call and explain, oh, no. Let me tell you about this whole war we faked.
Smash cut. This movie loves its smash cuts to televisions. It smash cuts to a news report of finding Stanley Motts' character dead of a heart attack by his pool.
Yep. And so the next scene we see is Bream going to the house for the...
Heavily implying, if not just straight up saying, that Conrad Bream murdered his friend in this film, Stanley Motts. Because they do kind of get a like friendly relationship by that. They like each other. They really do. They respect each other as their work they do.
Right, and I think that's true. They definitely seem to have a productive working relationship, although I feel like Motts is the one that carries the team in, and without Motts, the whole thing falls apart because Conrad Bream just isn't as creative and couldn't dig himself out of the holes he digs him into.
I just think Hoffman and De Niro should have done more work together.
To
They have great chemistry on screen.
to like
And Hayes, I could probably do that, but
to
Hoffman
liken
and
it to
Niro.
another political satire. In Thank You for Smoking, Rob Lowe is Dustin Hoffman, and Aaron Eckhart is Conrad Breen. He's the lobbyist. Conrad Breen could talk himself out of anything, which we see him do. Like, he talks the CIA out of killing him, and that's kind of like what Aaron Eckhart could do. Like, he talks Cancer Boy back into smoking. Right?
We'll have to do Thank You for Smoking on our next get together.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And there's definitely parallels between these two films, although they're certainly different because, of course, it's Conrad Breen if he was outside of government instead of inside.
Another one of those like characters we talked about.
Yeah.
Would you recommend this movie to anybody?
No, I would recommend this movie to nobody. My mom said, well, did you like the movie? I said, no. I said, it was profoundly depressing. I mean, I guess.
Show it to your mother?
No. I guess I would recommend this movie to anyone who is young and idealistic and needs to be grounded a little bit.
Like, still believes in the power of
Yeah.
democracy as a whole.
Like, you know who needs to see this movie? Paul's character from the movie Election.
All right, Tom, thank you for joining me on this. I hope you had fun.
I had a ton of fun.
I'm sorry for
Can't
ruining
wait
your
to
faith in
do-
democracy.
I mean, it was already ruined, if we're being honest. But thank you for making sure that faith was misplaced.
All right, brother.
Peace out. Love you, Beth.